What happens when the nation's most polarizing leader faces off against television's most relentless psychologist? When Donald Trump walked onto the set of Dr. Phil, what started as a routine interview quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive television moments of the year. What was meant to be a talk about leadership erupts into a standoff, and tempers flare. Every word becomes a weapon, every glance a challenge. This isn't just another talk show meltdown. This is a raw, unfiltered duel between power and vulnerability. And trust me, this talk show won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. Donald Trump walked onto the Dr. Phil stage like he owned it. The familiar stride, the confident smile, the little wave to the crowd. But this wasn't a rally or a press event. This was Dr. Phil's set, where power didn't come from applause but from control. Phil stood up to greet him, extending a hand. The handshake looked polite enough, but both men knew what it really was. Trump's grip was firm, Phil's just as steady. They held eye contact half a second too long. It wasn't friendship, it was calculation. Then they sat down, and the tension thickened like smoke. Phil leaned forward, voice calm but pointed. "Mr. President, today I want to talk about leadership." "Not politics," leadership, Trump smirked. "Good. Nobody understands a leadership better than me." Phil smiled faintly, but his eyes said he wasn't buying it. He crossed one leg over the other, hands folded. The air felt heavier with every second of silence before the first real question landed. Phil tilted his head slightly, the way he does when he's about to press on something soft that hurts. "Do you believe a great leader needs to know when to look in the mirror and say, 'I was wrong'?" Trump blinked once, then leaned back in his chair. His smile faded into a measured stare. "I think a great leader doesn't have time to look in the mirror, Phil. A great leader's too busy getting results." His tone was steady, almost rehearsed, but there was an edge there, dismissive, daring Phil to push back. Phil didn't flinch. "So taking responsibility isn't part of leadership?" he asked. Trump's answer came sharp. "I take responsibility every day, for winning, for building, for doing what needed to be done. You can call that whatever you want." He leaned forward now, mirroring Phil's posture, eyes narrowing just enough to turn the polite interview into something else entirely. A duel. Phil didn't move. He just nodded slowly, studying Trump like a man who'd seen this armor before. "Interesting," he said quietly, "because real strength usually starts where denial ends." For a moment, Trump didn't respond. The room felt colder. He adjusted his tie, a move that said more than words. Dr. Phil leaned back, keeping his voice steady but sharp. "I'm not talking about blame, Mr. President. I'm talking about internal responsibility, the kind that doesn't come from headlines or critics, but from looking in the mirror and asking yourself if you did the right thing." Trump gave a short, dry laugh. "Phil, I've been under a microscope for years. The media tracks my every move, twists every word. If that's not accountability, I don't know what is." Phil's reply came slow, deliberate. "That's not accountability. That's surveillance. Accountability is what happens when the cameras are off." Trump tilted his head, smirking. "I lead, Phil. I make decisions. I'm not here to confess sins." His tone was firm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of annoyance. Phil studied him carefully. He'd seen that posture before. The defensive lean, the arms folded tight across the chest, the half smile that didn't hide irritation. He knew exactly where to strike next. "You know," Phil said calmly, "in my experience, the people who avoid self-reflection the most are usually the ones who need it the most." The words landed like a hook. Trump straightened, his jaw tightening. "Are you trying to psychoanalyze me, Phil?" he asked, his voice dropping low, almost like a warning. Phil didn't blink. "No," he said quietly. "I'm pointing out what you're trying not to see." For a moment, the room went completely still. The air felt heavier, and neither man moved. Trump's eyes narrowed, scanning Phil's expression for any sign of retreat. There was none. Phil sat calm, unshaken, a professional poker face masking the quiet satisfaction of a man who had just hit a nerve. Trump leaned forward an inch, his voice firm but edged with steel. "Careful, Phil. I came here for a conversation, not a diagnosis." Phil gave a small, knowing smile. That depends, Mr. President, he said softly. Sometimes a real conversation reveals more than any diagnosis ever could. Trump leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply through his nose. Leadership isn't about sitting around talking about feelings, Phil. It's about action. It's about getting things done. You don't need emotions to make decisions. You need strength. His words came fast, clipped, like bullets from a man tired of being challenged. Phil didn't flinch. He kept his tone calm, steady, almost surgical. But strength without emotion isn't strength, he said quietly. It's just control. And control without compassion turns leadership into cold power. Trump smirked, his eyes glinting with irritation. So what, you think Putin runs therapy sessions? You think Xi sits down with his generals to talk about their inner child? Phil gave a small, knowing smile. No, he said, but I also don't recall either of them being loved. Trump let out a quick, humorless laugh, but it didn't sound confident. It sounded defensive. The smile faded almost as soon as it appeared. Phil's words had slipped through the armor, and he knew it. Phil leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, lowering his voice as if he were talking to a patient trying to hide behind pride. Sometimes people mistake stubbornness for strength, he said, but more often than not, it's just fear. Fear of admitting a mistake. The sentence hung in the air, slow and deliberate, like a knife twisting in slow motion. Trump's eyes sharpened, his posture straightening. Fear, he said, his voice rising just enough to sound dangerous. The only thing I'm afraid of is wasting my time being lectured by someone who's never led a single thing in his life. You sit in that chair every day pretending to fix people, but you've never had to make a decision that affected millions. Phil didn't back down. He nodded slowly, almost empathetically, but the glint in his eyes told a different story. You're right, I've never led a country, he said, but I've spent my career helping people face the parts of themselves they don't want to see. Maybe that's what makes this conversation uncomfortable. Trump leaned forward now, closing the space between them. You're mistaking discomfort for disrespect, he said, and that's your problem, Phil. You think every strong person is broken just because they don't cry on cue. Phil let the silence breathe before answering. No, he said quietly. I think some people mistake noise for strength because silence feels too close to the truth. The look Trump gave him then wasn't the look of a man amused. It was the look of a man who realized he was no longer in control of the room. Dr. Phil's tone shifted. He was done dancing around the edges. You always talk about achievements, he said, his words slow and deliberate. But you never talk about consequences. Trump's brow furrowed immediately. Consequences, he repeated as if the word itself offended him. The only consequence of my leadership was America becoming the strongest nation on earth. We rebuilt everything. We won again. Phil didn't blink. His reply was quiet but cutting. And yet it was also the most divided it's ever been. Strength without unity isn't strength. It's just noise. The air between them grew heavy. Trump leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping lower. Phil, division didn't start with me. It started long before I got here. I just had the guts to call it out. Phil gave a half smile, one that said he'd heard every deflection before. Calling it out is easy, he said. Owning your part in it, that's leadership. Trump's patience was starting to fray. His jaw tightened, and the edge in his tone turned to ice. I know why I'm here, Phil. You invited me because you needed a headline. Ratings. Views. That's what this is really about. Phil's expression didn't change. His reply was calm but cold. And what did you come here for, Mr. President? Validation? Another round of applause from people who already worship you? Trump smirked, the kind of smile that hides anger behind arrogance. No, he said slowly. I came here to remind America who really controls the room. Phil leaned back, crossing his arms. Then maybe you picked the wrong room, he said. Trump chuckled, low and sharp. We'll see about that. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Two men used to dominance, neither willing to yield. Phil's voice softened, but the words cut deeper. You know what I see, Mr. President? I see a man who can't stand a room that doesn't worship him. Trump's head turned sharply, eyes narrowing. Careful, Phil, he said, his tone dropping to a quiet warning. I'm not one of your patients. Phil nodded slightly. Then why are you acting like one? The line hit hard. For a second, Trump didn't speak. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. The faintest shift of discomfort, like a man caught off guard but refusing to show it. Trump leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You think I'm here for therapy? He said, voice low and tight. I came here to talk about leadership, about the country. Not to play your little psychology games. Phil didn't look away. I'm not playing, he said. I'm observing. And what I'm seeing is a man who can't stand being challenged without turning it into a fight. Trump let out a short breath, a half laugh that didn't sound amused. You've got guts, I'll give you that, he muttered. But you're way out of your depth. Phil stayed perfectly still, his voice calm but deliberate. I think you confuse depth with danger, he said. When people get close to something real, you push them away. You build walls so high you can't even see over them anymore. Trump stood abruptly, adjusting his tie, trying to reclaim control of the room. I didn't come here to be analyzed on national television, he said. Phil didn't move, didn't blink. Maybe not, he replied quietly, but it's interesting how fast you walk away the second someone holds up a mirror. Trump froze for half a second, staring down at Phil. The cameras were still rolling, but in that moment, it wasn't about the audience. It was about two men locked in a battle for dominance, one trying to defend his image, the other trying to pierce through it. Phil's gaze never wavered, and for the first time, Trump looked like he wasn't sure if he'd already lost more than the argument. Trump's voice grew sharper, the calm veneer slipping away. You say I can't face myself, but look at you, he fired back. You hide behind your degree, behind that title. Doctor. You lecture people about morality while pretending you're just asking questions. You're not a healer, Phil. You're a performer. Phil didn't blink. His reply came fast, like a counterpunch. I don't hide behind anything, he said, his tone firm but steady. I share what I've lived. I've owned my mistakes. You? You just monologue. You don't talk to people. You talk at them. Trump leaned forward, eyes narrowing. And yet here you are, talking to me like I'm one of your case studies. Phil gave a short, bitter laugh. No, Mr. President. You're not a case study. You're a textbook. The tension snapped taut. Trump's jaw tightened, and his next words came out like a slap. I built a country back from the edge. You built a brand out of other people's pain. Every tear that hits that floor pays your bills. Phil's composure cracked for the first time, his voice rising as he fired back. I don't exploit pain. I help people get past it. The difference is, I don't need to destroy someone's faith to feel powerful. Trump scoffed, shaking his head. You think you're helping? You think sitting in this studio pretending to understand people's lives makes you noble? He leaned closer, his tone dropping low and dangerous. You make a living diagnosing weakness. I make a living proving strength. Phil's reply came slow and deliberate, every word a deliberate strike. Strength without empathy is just domination, Mr. President, and domination always ends the same way. Alone, Trump's eyes flashed, his voice a mix of fury and disbelief. You think I'm alone? He snapped. I've got millions behind me. Phil didn't miss a beat. No, he said softly. You've got millions watching you. That's not the same thing. The air felt electric now. Two egos locked in open combat. Every word a weapon, every silence a countdown to the next explosion. Neither man blinked. Neither man backed down. And the longer it went on, the more it stopped feeling like an interview and started to feel like a war. Phil leaned forward now, his voice lower but cutting through the air like a blade. Tell me something, Mr. President, he said, his tone no longer calm but cold, deliberate. Do you ever wonder why every conversation you have turns into a battlefield? Trump froze mid-motion, caught off guard. His face shifted. Confusion, anger, then that familiar flicker of pride returning to his eyes. I fight because I have to, he said through clenched teeth. If I don't fight, this world will eat me alive. You wouldn't last a day in it. Phil took a slow step closer, his eyes steady. No one's trying to crush you, Donald. The truth is, you're doing that yourself. One argument at a time. Trump exhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. You talk like you know me, he said, his voice rising. You don't know what it's like to have millions of people waiting for you to slip. To live under attack every second of your life. Phil didn't back away. Maybe not, he said evenly, but I do know what it looks like when a man's ego becomes his cage. You built yours so strong, you can't even breathe inside it anymore. Trump's eyes flared, and for a moment, the words hit harder than he wanted to admit. The audience didn't exist. The cameras didn't matter. It was just two men standing inches apart, one refusing to break, the other trying to pretend he hadn't already. Trump straightened, his voice steadier but full of venom. I'm a winner, Phil. That's what I do. I win. I don't need you or anyone to teach me how to lose. Phil shook his head slowly, almost with pity. You're not afraid of losing, he said softly. You're afraid of admitting that your victories have cost you everything worth keeping. Trump laughed, but it was hollow. You think I'm broken? He snapped. You think power made me lonely? Phil's voice lowered to a near whisper. No, denial did. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air felt like it could shatter. Trump's hand twitched, as if deciding whether to point or to walk away. The lights above them hummed, casting their reflections across the stage. Two men, both powerful, both unyielding, both trapped by the same thing, the need to be right. A flash of emotion crossed Trump's face. Anger, pride, something dangerously close to regret. Then it vanished, replaced by the armor again. Phil stood his ground. Trump's jaw clenched. And for the first time, the silence between them said more than either man could. Trump stood up slowly, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. A sound that somehow felt louder than anything said in the last 20 minutes. He reached for the mic clipped to his jacket and unhooked it with deliberate care, his movements slow but filled with quiet anger. This isn't a conversation, Phil, he said, his voice low, steady, almost calm, but the calm of a man holding back fire. This is a trial, and I'm not interested in being your defendant. Phil looked up, meeting his eyes, the weight of exhaustion now mixed with something close to sadness. No, he said quietly. It's not a trial, Mr. President. It's a chance, but you just threw it away. Trump straightened his tie, the gesture sharp and controlled, like a soldier preparing to exit the battlefield with dignity intact. He took a few steps toward the studio door, then stopped halfway, his back still turned. You want me to be better, he said quietly, not looking back. I just want peace. And there's no peace in this room. His voice was calm, but the words hit like a final verdict. Then he kept walking. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the set, measured, final, unflinching. When the door closed behind him, it wasn't loud, but it carried a kind of permanence. Phil stayed where he was, still seated, still staring at the empty chair across from him. The silence felt endless. Finally he exhaled, his shoulders slumping, just slightly. He whispered to himself, almost as if afraid to break the air still heavy in the room. Sometime, he murmured, people don't fear the truth. They just fear losing the illusion that kept them standing. He looked down at the microphone lying where Trump had left it, its red light still blinking. And for the first time all night, Phil looked genuinely unsure whether he'd just witnessed a man walk out or a man shut himself in forever. The cameras kept rolling long after Trump left the stage. The red lights stayed on, humming quietly in the background. His chair was still there, slightly pushed back, the microphone resting on the seat, its cable still swaying from where he'd pulled it loose. The air hadn't moved. It was as if the room itself hadn't realized the interview was over. Phil sat in silence, eyes fixed on the empty space across from him. The hum of the studio equipment was the only sound left, steady and faint, like a heartbeat trying to fill the void. He rubbed his hands together once, then spoke barely above a whisper. He walked out, he murmured, but his shadow's still here. The producers didn't dare cut the feed. They knew this moment said more than any closing line could. The chair, the mic, the silence. It all felt heavier than words. Dr. Phil looked up toward the lights, eyes tired but still sharp. Somewhere between exhaustion and reflection, he began to speak. Not to the audience, not to the camera, but almost to himself. His voice came through soft, deliberate, and raw. Sometime, he said, real strength isn't in how loud you fight, but in the moment you realize silence just won the battle. The mic on the table caught the last breath of his words before fading into static. And for a brief second, that silence, tense, unbroken, felt louder than anything that had come before. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another explosive moment from television's most unpredictable talk shows. Thanks for watching, and trust me, the next one will hit even harder.